Welcome back to our channel, where we share the stories they tried to silence, the truths hidden behind uniforms and assumptions, and the quiet power of dignity in the face of injustice. Today's story is about a man named Darnell Hayes and a morning that revealed just how fragile the illusion of respect can be when the badge comes off. Darnell Hayes. That name carried weight in Fulton County. He wasn't just a police officer. He was a police chief, a man who had worn the badge with pride, with discipline, with the kind of integrity that most only pretend to understand. But on a quiet Tuesday morning at 6:37 a.m., that badge was at home. And Darnell? He was just another black man in a hoodie, stepping out into the misty Georgia dawn with a cup of coffee in one hand and peace on his mind. No sirens, no dispatch, just his favorite ritual, an early morning drive before the world woke up, before the uniform reminded him of everything he carried. The roads were empty, the sky still undecided between night and day. It was a sacred hour, until flashing blue lights shattered the calm. He hadn't been speeding. No broken taillight. No reason. But still, he pulled over. Calmly. Deliberately. Hands at 10 and 2. Not because he was guilty, but because he was seasoned. Because he knew. The drill. The protocol. The way a routine stop can turn into a nightmare. Not from something he'd seen on social media. Not from a headline. From memory. From experience. Two white officers approached. One to his window. One flanking the passenger's side like they were preparing for a threat. One hand hovered above a holster. The other knocking sharp against the glass. License and registration. The taller one barked. No greeting. No reason. Just command. Darnell nodded, said nothing, moved slowly. Deliberate. Controlled. He reached for his wallet with the kind of caution only black men in America understand. Nice and easy, the officer warned. Darnell didn't flinch. He handed over his ID. The officer looked at it, then looked back at Darnell. This your car? Darnell met his eyes. Calm. Measured. Yes, sir. The officer chuckled, dry and bitter. Driving through Buckhead in a hoodie at 6 in the morning? He leaned in. You fit the description. The words weren't new, but each time they cut deeper. Darnell didn't react, didn't explode, but inside, something burned. And what description is that? He asked. The officer didn't answer. He nodded to his partner. Step out of the vehicle. Darnell hesitated, not in fear, in disbelief. Officer, is there a legal basis for the stop? The younger cop stepped forward, aggressive, posturing. You resisting? We can make this difficult. He could have ended it there. Could have said the words, I'm Chief Hayes. Could have shown them their mistake. But he didn't, because he wanted to see how far they'd go. Darnell stepped out, still silent, still steady. But every muscle in his body tensed under the weight of the insult. They turned him around, patted him down, roughly, like he was nothing. You got any weapons? Drugs, one asked. No, officer. His voice steady, his dignity untouched. What are you doing in this neighborhood? He didn't answer, because what answer would satisfy them? What words would undo their assumptions? The younger one took his license back to the cruiser. Minutes passed. Long, humiliating minutes. Cars drove by, slowed, watched. To them, he was just another black man on the side of the road, just another threat neutralized. Then came the chirp, static, silence. Then the dispatcher's voice. Be advised, individual is the Fulton County Police Chief. Repeat, subject is a police chief. Everything stopped. The officer froze. The younger one stumbled out of the cruiser, like gravity had doubled. Chief Hayes, sir, Darnell turned slowly. Calm. Precise. You didn't ask. They fumbled for an apology, but Darnell said nothing. He got back in his car. No rant, no anger, just the weight of a truth he had always known. The uniform may protect you inside the building, but out here, in a hoodie, you're just another black man. But the story didn't end there. The next morning, those same officers were called into headquarters. They walked into the boardroom, expecting a reprimand, maybe a warning. But what they saw instead was the man they had profiled, in full uniform, for gold bars on his shoulders, a polished badge on his chest. Chief Darnell Hayes. They didn't recognize him in the hoodie, but now they stood frozen in front of the man who signed their evaluations, who had built the department they claimed to protect. Darnell didn't yell, didn't threaten. He spoke like a man who had been silent for far too long. You didn't just stop a man, he said. You stopped a father, a mentor, a man who spent 26 years building what you disrespected in 6 minutes. Silence, thick and stifling. You didn't stop me because of a violation. You stopped me because of a hoodie, because of my skin, because your training didn't teach you how to see beyond fear. The older officer stared at the floor. The younger one looked hollowed out. You didn't make a mistake, Darnell continued. You made a choice, and that choice is why our community doesn't trust this badge. Then came the paperwork. One officer, mandatory retraining. The other, suspended pending review. But that wasn't enough. Darnell went public, stood before the city council, not in silence, not to protect the image of the force, but to tell the truth. For every man pulled over for looking suspicious, for every child who learned how to place their hands before they learned how to tie their shoes, he told them the story, not in anger, but with clarity, with purpose. He said, I was pulled over not because I did something wrong, but because they assumed something about who I was. And the badge I've worn for 26 years couldn't protect me from that assumption. The video went viral, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real, because every black man watching saw themselves in the story, because every mother who feared for her son saw her nightmare unfold in broad daylight. And then came change. Darnell implemented sweeping reforms. Mandatory bias training, real training, not checkbox training. Body cams on every stop. An anonymous hotline for misconduct, bypassing internal politics. Real consequences, real accountability. Slowly, things began to shift. Officers who once mocked sensitivity training started paying attention. Patrols stopped hunting for shadows and started having conversations. Real community began to grow in the cracks of broken trust. Darnell served 3 more years as chief, and when he finally retired, the city came out for him, but not in a banquet hall, not behind closed doors. On the same stretch of road where he'd been pulled over, they renamed it Hayes Way, not just for the man, but for the new road he paved, a road of visibility, of reckoning, of change. And as Darnell stood there, watching young recruits, black, brown, white, proud, take their oath, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Because justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it stands still. Sometimes it wears a hoodie and keeps its hands at 10 and 2. And sometimes it waits for the sun to rise, quiet, unwavering, and ready. They didn't see a chief that morning. They saw a threat. But when the light came on, they saw the mirror. And in that mirror, they didn't just see Darnell. They saw everything they didn't want to confront. Because you can train a man to shoot. Train a man to follow orders. But if you don't train him to see, to listen, to question his assumptions, then all the badges in the world won't stop the damage he does with his eyes. Darnell never asked for special treatment. He asked for fairness, for decency, for the same grace the badge claims to represent. And in his silence, he taught the loudest lesson: never judge a person by the clothes they wear. Because the man you pull over today might be the one who signs your paycheck tomorrow, the one who builds a policy you swear to follow, the one who protects your right to be blind, until he makes you see. And this was a story of a badge that didn't shine in the dark, but a man who did. Thanks for watching. See you in our next video.